So let's ground in this situation. It's a typical day as an assistant principal. You start with a plan. You're going to do walkthroughs, feedback, and maybe time to work with a teacher or a team today. But then the day starts. A discipline issue, a phone call, a student situation, a teacher who needs immediate support, the need of a substitute. And before you know it, the day is gone. And the work you plan to do, the work that actually moves instruction, didn't happen. This is one of those moments where you feel the pull between urgency and leadership focus. And over time, if you're not careful, that pull can start to define your entire role. All right, so Crystal and Kendall, I want to ask you, when you heard the scenario today, the tension between urgency and leadership focus, what stands out to you?
When I think about that, I have to really remember to be intentional with my time. There are so many things that can pull you aside and get you off your plan for the day.
Yep.
So you really have to decide, is this something that needs me? Can I delegate to somebody else? And you do have to make a decision in the moment, but ultimately you have to do the work that moves the needle for kids.
Does that feel like your reality, that scenario where you enter with, this is what I'm going to do today, and maybe have a to-do list, and then, oh, whoa, something else happens?
Every single day. I can't think of one day that hasn't been the reality.
Yeah.
And I think it's very easy to walk in and let all of the action that's going on everywhere with different people, different scenarios, all of those things, it's very easy to just jump right in. Typically, school leaders that are in these types of roles typically are people that are going to start trying to fix the things and trying to get everything smooth so that we can get back to what we walked in and intended to do for the day. But at some point, you've got to make that intentional decision to move out of that instead of just continuing to go through that all day long.
Are there things that you tell yourself or you ask yourself that helps you make that decision? Should I deal with this quote unquote urgent situation, or should I stick with my plan? What goes on in your mind? How do you determine which way to go?
I think honestly, with time, your experience starts helping you in your mind be able to prioritize. I think at the beginning, it's really hard to understand as those scenarios are popping up. But with experience and as you go through those, you start to recognize this is happening. A lot of it comes down to delegation also. Like, who else on the team can I call that can step in and take this situation from here? And I know everything's going to get taken care of. So a lot of it, I think, goes down to that as well as being able to know who your team is, because you also gain that through your experience as well, understanding who the team is that you can call to step in and lean in certain situations as well.
I was just to add to that, a question that I ask myself is, who's the best person for this job, for this moment, for this time, for this issue? So, because sometimes it's just not going to be me. I'm not an expert in everything. Sometimes I have to call in a social worker or a counselor who they know all of the resources that we have available, whereas I only have an idea. So that's to manage it. Who's the best person for this job?
Nice. So sometimes I think that can feel overwhelming, just the flow of information toward a school leader of, I need help. Can you help me? Do you have just a moment? Can I talk to you for a second? That's constantly happening. So let's just name a few things that were overwhelming to you in your first year. So when you think about back to your first year of being an assistant principal, what were some of the things that overwhelmed you?
I think for me, my actual first experience was in secondary, and it was actually in a different school district, and it was very discipline focused. Really, my two buckets were student discipline and teacher evaluation. And that's a lot when you're the one person doing the majority of all of it. That became very overwhelming. And when you haven't lived it and you haven't had the experience to figure out, how do I spread this out? If you put off, say, teacher evaluations because you've been overwhelmed with student discipline, and then all of a sudden you walk into a teacher's classroom and you're like, oh geez, there should have been a lot of here, and there's some things we have to address, but we also have timelines on evaluations and observations and those kinds of things. And if you're already pushing towards the end of that, now you've lost the length of time that you needed to be able to actually give that teacher, to give them what they needed, to be able to give them their coaching and feedback to get them to where they need to be for student success.
About you?
For me, it was just the sheer number of decisions that have to be made in a given moment. Constant questions, constant, what do I do about this? What do I do about that? And first year in, I didn't know anything. But at the same time, I was just like, ask me the question. I might not know the answer, but I can find it. And honestly, looking for that answer does help. It helps me know the answer. And I found with time, I started, wait, I know this. I was able to direct and then take some pride in that. But I think it's also easy to become overwhelmed, not just with knowing or learning all of the things and having to make decisions in a moment's notice, turning that into impact. We want to learn these things and still know how all of the systems and functions work so that we can do the work we need to do in a meaningful way. So there's also a lot of, again, am I the best person for this job? Do we need a hierarchy? And there were a lot of those types of questions that came into my mind. And so it really did help to get a visual for me, having a flow map that if you need instructional, curricular support, literacy support, I'm one of the go-tos.
Sure.
That's my wheelhouse. Whereas if you had questions about administrative questions my first year, you may want to go to the principal.
And I think that's part of it too, what you're talking about, because what you're saying, Crystal, was actually almost the opposite for me. Because I hadn't been in elementary. The curriculum side was not my strength. But like protocols and processes and administrative stuff, I could do that all day long, but don't come to me and ask me about it. I'm not going to be able to tell you what the steps are to do that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I was in the opposite space. And so to be able to start learning those different things based on what strengths you're bringing to the table and the things that you're like, I've got a road here that I need to learn.
That's interesting. You guys had almost opposite
Yeah.
experiences. That shows that everyone's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't make assumptions that every leader needs the same thing or has the same experience. What didn't you expect your first year as an AP? Where did you feel the pull toward urgency the most as an AP in your first year?
I'll take it. So in terms of long term, it was definitely work on literacy. I wanted to see scores increase. I wanted to see kids reading and making a lot of growth. That was my long-term sense of urgency there. The day-to-day, though, is very different. Honestly, it was student behavior my first year and parent communication. Those were by far the immediate needs that I didn't fully expect to come my way. But I also know that to be really intentional with the work that I'm doing. You can't let those things pull you away from what is most important.
Sure.
So,
Nice. What about you?
Yeah, so I think for me, my first role as a school administrator was very, like I mentioned a little bit ago, was very student discipline focused. That was probably 90 to 95% of my workday. And as I came into TPS, it was a very immediate shift, and I saw it immediately was like, there is an expectation to be an instructional leader, and that is a very different role. So coming in thinking, oh, I have all this experience, but then when I walked into this role, even though it was the same title, it's a totally different role. Now, what that did for me was, number one, it made me recognize that there were things that I needed to grow in, and it truly has, over the past 2 years, shaped who I am as a leader. I am a completely different leader now than I was. Quite honestly, I had been doing it for 5 years in another district, and I was nowhere near the type of leader that I am now. I wouldn't have been able to speak to any sort of thing under the umbrella of instructional leadership coming from my previous role. So I think that was what I've recognized through that is, if you're not an instructional leader, like a true instructional leader, the work you're doing is not going to impact student success.
right.
You're checking boxes, you're making sure things are falling in the compliance column or whatever that might be. But at the end of the day, you're really not moving the needle for student success.
It's powerful learning. So what were some things that you did early? What were some things that you did early on that you realized weren't actually helping, weren't making a difference or having an impact?
Well, I could feel immediately that I was reactive. So if anything needed to happen in the moment, it was like, this happens, now I do this. So it started as, how do I respond to things? And that's just where my mind was. But I also realized that I wasn't really driving anything forward. And to me, the biggest red flag was that I was noticing I wasn't getting into classrooms as much. My experience has been around instructional coaching, literacy. I was a literacy partner. So instruction is the core of my being. And to me, that was a big red flag. And I was like, wow, especially because I was really trying to start the year, my first year, with my strengths as what I lead with. This is going to be my area of focus for the year. Shift into from district level thinking to site level thinking. And I realized just that being reactive, it was by doing that, you're not leading, you're managing, if that makes sense. So it takes a lot of intentionality, a lot of really stopping to think about what's my red flag classroom visits, the number that I'm doing. And I'm so glad that we have the ability to do those walkthroughs and track all of that, and then track the feedback, and then going back and looking at what are some challenges I'm giving teachers, and then how are we circling back to those challenges and closing that loop. So to me, that kind of drives the work forward, is the instructional focus is just maintains the goal, making sure students are getting the opportunities that they deserve.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think talking about reactive, that's something that I had also thought about. And I think one thing also that came to my mind was like organized chaos. And so I think if you really think about it, especially for people that have come from a classroom into a role like this, because a lot of times that's a pretty natural progression, that they've been in a classroom for several years and now they're moving into an AP role. And you come from a classroom where every day you've made lesson plans for the week. Most of the time, things pretty much go as planned for the most part, right? Things aren't just showing up every 2 or 3 minutes that are changing you off of that course of that lesson plan. You show up as an assistant principal, and one of the things that I found myself doing is I pride myself in being a multitasker. And so I think I immediately got into this role of I can handle this because I am a multitasker and all these things are coming at me. We're having to try to make quick decisions based on all these things. But what I started to realize was I was just being reactive to everything that was going on. And so I wasn't being system strategic. I wasn't doing all of those things that make the impact in the end. And so I think I very quickly realized I'm being super reactive to all of this, and I've got to get back to where I want to be and get my focus to where I want to be and prioritize things and be able to make those decisions to do what we need to do.
That's a perfect segue to the next question. You had this realization that you had to take control back. What systems or habits did you actually start to implement or to take back your time and to use it in a proactive way?
I would say 2 quick things, just super easy, quick levers for me, were got to use your calendar. You've got to block time in your calendar, and you have to make intentional decisions that you're going to stick to whatever your calendar says. You also have to set an environment, a culture with those that are around you to understand that that is part of your role. So, for example, maybe in my building, many people have access to the school leaders' calendars, and they can see what we're doing and when we're doing things and that kind of stuff. And so they understand, this time of year, they're in an interview right now, interviewing someone to be a teacher. We probably shouldn't step in their office right this second. They know we have an open door policy. They know that 90% of the time they can show up and walk in and ask us a question. But they also know there's certain things that are protected time, and they're going to see that on our calendar. So I think putting the things on the calendar, super important. Also, a super easy thing that I had to start doing for myself was I found myself getting stuck in my office. You run in real quick, you sit down, and you're like, I need to go do this one quick thing. And you go in and you sit down and you start to do it. And then, let me check my emails real quick. And so you start doing that. And then while you're doing that, someone comes by. And so now the next thing you look up and you've been in your office for 2 hours and you're like, just like Crystal said a while ago, I haven't been in classrooms because I came in here to send one quick email or call one quick parent. And now here I am 2 hours later. And so I actually started putting alarms on my phone for every so often so that it would go off to remind me. I might be out in classrooms, great, but if I'm not, it was just like that quick reminder to me of like, get up and move. Get into the classrooms where you need to be. And so I think that was the thing. So those were like easy levers that I think I did. Big picture, looking at everything was determining what is important. And I've already spoken to this, but I recognized and realized very quickly that it was the instructional leadership that needed to be the focus. And so as a leader, I think then the question for me, do my actions and my words, if you were to go ask anybody in my building, what's her focus? What is she doing? They need to, my goal is that they would be able to tell you that through my actions and through my words, they see me as an instructional leader. So if I'm not doing things and saying things that meet that and show that, then I'm off somewhere, and I've got to correct that.
So what systems or habits have you used to help?
It's funny because I actually was thinking the exact same thing. Every day is so different that it's virtually impossible to be able to function without your calendar. You've got so many meetings, you've got community partner meetings and IEP meetings, and you have just so many things. So ensuring that your calendar represents your plan for the day and for the week is crucial. So time blocking was for me the biggest issue, living by the calendar, but that calendar has to represent what it is you're wanting to do, goals, your ultimate goals, not just short term for this day, but long term. Also, another piece that I wanted to add as well was keeping track of the needs in the building, whether it's from students, teachers, or whatever, and determining, is there an easier way? Constantly asking myself that, is there an easier way? Does everybody know who to go to if they have a question for whatever? So again, I'm a visual person, so having a flow map of who do I go to for XYZ. They have a resource that they can look at. They have quick links that they can get to, and that's readily available for them with all of those important things. That sets teachers up to be able to find their own answers, get their own, look at the resources for themselves. And then another thing from the instructional coach perspective, really trying to decipher, is this need something that I need to do or I need to coach around? Because it is so easy to just fall into a trap of, I'm just going to do it all myself. You absolutely can't. And if you try, you'll fail. So you have to be able to know who your people are, the best people for the job. I feel like I keep coming around in a circle, but you have to know the best people for the job and also build teachers' capacity for themselves. So if you're not the best person for the job, who do they go to? If you are the best person, does the teacher need coaching around this, or is it actually something you need to do? So, because we have to whittle that down, because it's everything.
It is.
And you're one person. You can't be everything, everywhere, all the time to everyone.
Sure.
So we've got to prioritize and whittle down what you take on.
So if you could go back to your first year, what would you tell yourself to stop doing immediately?
Oh, man. I would say stop trying to prove yourself by doing it all.
Yep.
I did take on more administrative roles this year because I really tried to grow. Where are my gaps? What do I need to learn? So this year I took on a lot of the administrative roles, but man, it is important, but I don't want to lose the focus of instructional coaching, that piece. So being able to step back and reflect, I can't let this busyness stop me from doing the most important work, which is what I started with my first year. My second year actually is when I started feeling more busy. Attendance team, being the head of that, and lots of other IEP meetings, and just lots of things. Tiger Council, that's our PTA kind of thing. But it's, don't stop trying to prove yourself by taking on everything.
What about you, Kendall?
So this is going to sound really cliche, but I would say stop missing the forest for the trees. I think when you are busy looking at the trees, you're in that reactive mode. You've got to, as a school leader, be able to pull back. Are there times that you're going to have to stop and dig into something? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you can't get so focused on those things that you start losing sight of the whole system. Because for it to truly make an impact and for students to be getting what they need, for teachers to be getting what they need, for everybody in that building to be getting what they need from you as the school leader, you have to make sure that every single piece of that system is a well-oiled machine and all working together. Because if you're zoned in on one or two things and you get so tied up into those that all the other pieces start getting a little out of whack and whatever, you're going to miss it all. And then at the end, you're going to be like, where did we get off track here? So I think it's hone in when you need to on certain things, but you've still got to stay at that systems level at all time. And that's always got to be in the back of your mind. Yeah.
I've heard people talk about, or other leaders talk about, getting up on the balcony, raising up where you can see across the system more, whether it's your school system or the district as a whole, that system, but pulling up on the balcony to look for those trends. So I hear that. So in Tulsa, we talk about protecting instructional time. What does that look like for leaders? So I know we've talked a little bit about being in classrooms, but are there other ways that you protect instructional time, and might it look different than just being in the classroom? Are there other ways of protecting instructional time?
I think first and foremost is your master schedule. I think the master schedule is a direct reflection of making sure that that instructional time is protected. I know built a master schedule for many years at this point, and I always start with the core instructional time, and then you build everything else around it, because that should be the focus. When lunch is, when a teacher's planning period is, when recess is, all of those things, are they all necessary? Do we have to do them? Do they have to be a part of the day? Absolutely. But our core instruction should be our core focus, and so you have to start that master schedule with that.
I would agree wholeheartedly with the master schedule. That does, it sets, especially, you want to make sure your core instruction is uninterrupted to the best of your ability. And from there, it's also, you've got to train staff and set expectations about, we're not going to all call for one teacher or one student during a core instructional block. We're not doing that. Counselors, and if it's preventable, they're not going into classrooms during that core instructional block or having community partners come in at that time, unless they're there to support that core instruction. But we're not pulling kids out. Kids need to be in the classrooms at that time. It also, I think, we've got to mention too, what are kids being sent out of the classroom for? How is classroom management for teachers? The tier 1 behavior, responsive teachers. Are they trained and are they effective with building relationships that are positive and set the tone for quality learning? Are they really setting the culture in the classroom as we do in the building? This is important. Our most important block of time is walk to read, literacy interventions. And I tell people, like, this is my baby time. I will protect this time with my life. Now, it's a little hyperbolic, but that is no interruptions. No, this is go time. This is the most important time of the instructional day. I'm a literacy person, so that's my hill that I'll die on. But just, it's master schedule. That is definitely foundational. From there, it's culture. What do you allow? What do you not allow? That's the setting of the culture.
Got it. What's one move that helped you shift from reacting to actual leading? Is there a tip or a trick or something you've learned over the past 2 years that you'll stop, it'll kind of focus you on, I'm not going to react, I'm actually going to lead?
Honestly, one of the things that I do is I stop and start looking at data. Because if I start looking at data, I can see what progress are we really making. Those are facts that I can look at. It's not subjective. And it tells me, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing or not? And if that data isn't showing the movement or the progress that we're looking for, then that tells me we've got to stop and readjust a little bit.
I get really excited when kids have taken their MAP test and it's like, oh my gosh, how did they do? I get really excited with that stuff too. So I'm sorry to agree with you so much, But yes, the data it's a driver.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest drivers. And that is both in regard to the academics as well as behavioral, looking at suspensions, looking at referrals, the types of behavior, looking at our subgroups, state report card. There are so many data points that we have to look at that sometimes they can even be contradictory, but at the same time, it all tells a story. For example, we had our 4th and 5th grade students, same teachers because they're departmentalized, but one class performed really well and another class not well. And going back to the drawing board, we really looked at what's the difference here. And it was the testing environment that students had. And by reflecting on that data, we need to make a big adjustment. We have 2 new teachers. We've got some long-term subs. How are we going to react to this? Because we can't let that continue because we figured out the root cause. So we adjusted our moves. And so that's basically it, is being a leader, you've got to figure out what's the story and how do you react. And data's it tells it.
And I think you hit on one thing there, Crystal, as far as really just to simplify it down is you have to look at the ABCs of data. There's data in all of those, right? And so as long as you're looking at attendance, behavior, and curriculum, because they all impact it.
Right.
We had similar situation with our 5th grade. We're departmentalized. We've got 2 groups. We had one group after our first set of MAP that their outcomes were just very different in the 2 rooms. We started looking, and once we got to behavior, we started seeing that we had a core group of kids who were our frequent flyers and behavior, and they were all grouped together in one room. So we did some adjusting of what kids were in what room, and we started to see a difference. And it's because we had them all in there together, and they're all getting amped up and being behavior issues, which was detracting from the academic side, which is what we were seeing. And so once we were able to dig down into the data and see that, we were able to make those adjustments. But I do think you have to look at all 3 of those ABCs at all times to see the whole
gotta
picture.
dig deep too. You cannot just look at
No, you can't be surface level.
Right.
Look at the quick
Right.
overall report and think you're going to find the issue.
What's a leadership move that you wish you'd learned earlier? Or what's a current leadership move you're learning right now? Either one.
I would say for me, I've never been scared of hard conversations. It's never scared me, but I think I have, with the current leader that I'm with, she's done a really good job of coaching me, giving me examples. I sit in with her. She sits in with me, but then tags in if there's certain things. And so I think that's something that, even though I wasn't scared of it, I don't think I was like expert at it by any means. And I feel like that's something that I've really tried to push myself on, and that she's been able to lean in and kind of help me with. So that has felt good. For sure.
How would that have impacted your first year as an AP if you'd had that skill and knowledge?
Well, first of all, I think being able to, I'm just in general in my personal life or whatever, I live in reality, let's just shoot things straight kind of person. I think when I got in my professional world, it was like there was maybe some timid things of, can I really say that? And I just get straight to the point with them, and here's where we are, here's where we need to get to. That's my personality, but I think maybe sometimes I shied away from that in a professional conversation with people. And so I think learning how to do that and bring it into the professional world in a way in which I'm supporting the people that I'm trying to coach and lead has been really helpful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Crystal, what about you? What's a leadership move that you wish you'd learned earlier, or something that you're learning right now?
I'm currently learning just make sure you're honest. And I don't mean honest as in just tell the truth. I mean honest as in you are very clear. You are very precise. You say what needs to be said. And it's hard to walk that line because I immediately want to sugarcoat things for other people. I don't want to hurt feelings. And I want to get the feedback. Just say the thing. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Say what I need to do better. But for some reason, I'm so concerned with hurting other people's feelings. And so I'm just like, I'm just going to say the thing. Now, I will say one tool, definitionally, GPT can sometimes help me reword things. And so I do use that, if I'm completely honest. I don't want the language to get in the way of the message.
Sure.
So whether that is, I don't want to come across as harsh when it's not intended to be, and I don't want to come across as beating around the bush when I need to be direct. The language is tricky, especially at my school site. We've got a lot of Spanish-speaking teachers and students, and so you have to be even more cognizant of the language itself, and by being honest, open, clear. Another thing I think would be follow through. If I say I'm going to do the thing, because to me, that's the foundation of building trust. And one thing that I do say at the beginning of every year is I'm going to do my best to make every single person, every teacher in the building, a better teacher every day. That is my goal, so that we can do better for kids every day. So essentially, this is my honest statement. How am I going to go about doing it? So I'm going to be honest. I'm going to give you the feedback in a way that is hopefully inspired, because you don't want to knock anyone down. Teaching is hard. Sure. It is the hardest job. So that's never the goal, but it needs to be clear and precise so that we can make shifts. And then follow up, do the thing, be there for the teacher when they're in a difficult meeting with a parent, or build trust in all the ways you can. So.
For sure.
Awesome. So the technical responsibility here is focus and monitoring what matters most. But the 22nd responsibility is navigating the tension between urgency and leadership focus. Urgency will always win unless you actively protect against it. Over time, your calendar becomes your leadership. And if it's filled with reaction, then that's what your role becomes. So try this tomorrow. If you're listening and thinking about your own leadership practice, here's something you can try this week. Block a few hours on your calendar for instructional leadership. Protect it like you would a meeting you cannot miss. Because if we want stronger instruction, it starts with protecting time to actually lead it. In closing, I'd like to say thank you to Crystal and Kendall for your honesty and for sharing what this role actually looks like in practice. I'll leave you with one final thought. Leadership is learning how to decide what matters most. We'll see you next time on the 22nd responsibility.